Good.
Good? Okay.
I know you're on the agenda. Can I give you this? So I'm not connecting this email.
Okay, I'm going to call the Wednesday, December 14th, 2022 Finance Committee meeting of the Gardner City Council to order. Clerk will please call the roll.
President Kaczynski.
Present.
Councilor Ronald.
Present.
And Councilor Bernardo.
Present.
Is anyone here recording the meeting? Okay. Item number 1, acceptance/correction to minutes of prior meetings, June 17th, 2022.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as presented.
Second?
Motion made by Councilor Cormier, seconded by Councilor Generalowitz to accept the minutes as presented. Is there discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Okay, items that were referred. Item number 10855, an order appropriating $10,000 from free cash to city clerk's temporary staffing account. We received a letter from Mayor Nicholson, as we typically do on these items, and Clerk Serafian has talked about this in the past as well. Mayor Nicholson, would you like to explain?
Yes, just with both assistant city clerks retiring within the next calendar year, looking to get people trained before they leave, particularly since the scheduled time that they two would be leaving is right around the time nomination papers would be due back to the city clerk's office for the municipal election. So with that busy time of year coming, preparing for the election, as well as everything else that's going on with the annual city census, the dog license date being within that time, several different other key functions of the city clerk's office happening during that same time period. We want to make sure there isn't a lag in when a seasoned staff member leaves and when a new staff member starts that requires extra training and things like that, that services don't get done or get done with some growing pains along the way, rather than getting those growing pains out of the way while there's someone there to check the work. We did put a additional staff member in the clerk's budget under the temporary staffing line item in last year's, the current fiscal year's operating budget, and that's working well right now with Mix Lawrence. However, with both assistant clerks retiring at the same time, if we were to just keep that now we've got the clerk training an assistant clerk while that assistant clerk is training another staff member at the same time, and things could fall through the cracks. So this would allow us to just make sure that there's a seamless transition fully within the office at the same time. I don't think we've had a time where we've had both assistant department heads retire within a week of each other. So this would be able to just help with that continuity there. I do plan on keeping some funding in the clerk's office under the temporary staffing line that we're paying for one of those staff members right now. That way, particularly around election time, we can hire a part-timer to make sure that the counter gets manned and things are operating fine in the office. That way the assistant clerks and the clerks can really focus on the election, the council, and everything else that's going on, and just make sure that our public-facing interactions are still being done, even though the elections have been taking up so much more time in that office with everything from the Votes Act and everything else that's going on with the changes that have been made in elections in Massachusetts. So this is just the next step in that process.
Clerk Serafian, do you have anything to add? Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
I'm just trying to avoid that gap from when the two assistants leave, and it's not just me and someone else. It's such a busy office. I just can't have just down one person.
I think the no disruption in services is really important, like you said, it being an election year, which it's always an election year, but it being that, and also the expectations on clerk's offices, as we've seen since 2020, have just been huge, and without a lot of assistance from financial side from anywhere else but within the city, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad to see that this was planned, quite honestly, and I think things are working out well with the current staffer that you have in there. So I'm going to support this. Anything from the committee? Could
I just add? Oh, sorry, Council, go ahead.
So we did budget for one shadow person, if you will.
Yep.
And that's on board. So this would be for a second one.
Correct.
And you still will have monies for, because I know comes election time.
Super busy.
Sometimes you coincide with vacations, etc. Or you can never predict an illness. If you need to get somebody in. Okay. Be assured.
Mr. Mayor?
Just to add that I fully understand that the city clerk's department is your department, but just helping out with the financials where we can in the operations of the departments that are overseen by the council. Thank you.
The $10,000 will cover the
That'll cover us from January through the end of the year.
Up to June 30th.
Yeah.
I move to recommend passes the order of the full council.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Derlot, seconded by Councilor Cormier to recommend passage to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Item number 10860, an order authorizing $107.96 payment of the prior year for airport department operating expenditure. This is for a Verizon bill, or a few Verizon bills since February 2022 that have been unpaid. Can you just kind of explain how that happened?
Yeah, Ken Bonk had been the chair of the Airport Commission for 2 decades and retired in February. Had been training a new clerical staff overseeing the airport at the same time because the clerical staff who had been working with Ken also retired around that time. So this is just something that in the mix of all of those transitions and trainings got missed. It is only $107, or just about $108, but since it is something that we have to use this current fiscal year funding to pay for a last year bill, it requires a vote of the council. But it's in the operating budget that we already have appropriated for them, so there's no additional funding needed.
Thank you.
We have gone out posting the job position for the airport manager about 3 or 4 times and have yet to get applicants that aren't applicants qualified for the position, I should say, rather than those who view it more as a secretary type position rather than someone who has to go out and manage the day-to-day operations of the airport. So we are going to try to see if we can rework the job description a little bit to see if we can get someone in and they would be the ones in charge of doing this rather than right now one of the clerical staff members in the HR department oversees all the billing process there. That'll help clean that up moving forward in the future, but at least now that training's been done to recognize and we are caught up after this set of bills are paid.
I mean, it's been a problem over the years. Having been on that commission a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think the Wright brothers were right.
I move to recommend passage to the full council.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Derlot, seconded by Councilor Cormier to recommend passage of the order of the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion passes. Item number 10863, an order transferring $36,500 from Veterans Department Veterans Benefit operating expenditures to clerk/assistant salaries and wages expenditures. We have Director Gabrilla here. Good morning. Thanks for being here. And so we'd like to start.
This is something that we'd like to do with, you'll see later on in the agenda, we're proposing to bring on another town in our Veterans Department with the statutory limits on what we have to do for minimum staffing levels for Veteran Service Departments. This does put us up to the requirement, or closer to the requirement, I should say, of getting us a full-time assistant veterans director. At the same time, we've seen the volume of stuff that have been being handled by the Veterans Department growing as well, particularly with Veterans Administration claims, something that our Veterans Service Office was not running before Director Gabrilla took over, and are now able to help that. But what that is doing by, excuse me, by bringing on more VA claims is allowing us to free up some of our Chapter 115 funding, where the VA claims are paid for directly from the federal government, where we have to budget for our Chapter 115 claims. And they're a lot of times more lucrative for the veteran itself and getting a higher amount of funding than if they were to just get local city benefits. But you cannot have a duplication of benefits, so that actually takes them off our budget and puts them onto the federal government's budget. In doing so, coupled with veterans who are either moving, getting jobs, or have passed away, we have about a $75,000 surplus right now projected in the Veteran Services budget, with the majority of that, about $70,000-ish, coming from the Veterans Benefit line item. So we know that there's extra money in there that we're not going to need by the end of the fiscal year. So looking to move that funding from that expense line item into the salary line item for the assistant director of the Veterans Department. That way we can bring that up full-time. Needed to bring that position up to full-time salary as well as the benefits for that position. So all of the fringe benefits, health insurance, everything like that is all included in this transfer request here, just so we can better meet the operations of the department as it continues to grow, but also meet the demand that we're seeing right now that is actually financially helping the city in the long run.
Anything to add? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I think you basically covered all of it, but I do want to reiterate, with the new budget that we did, that extra, I did re-crunch some numbers, so it's closer to about $87,000 that we're going to have in excess probably. That's already with the increased cost of making that position full-time and covering all of those benefits. So even after all of that, we still have an excess of 87,000. Plus we have the income from the district and all the other communities brings in about an additional 40,000 for the year, if we end up adding in the other community that we'll be talking about later.
So I have two questions. Well, one isn't really a question. The first one is, can you write something to add to the packet for the council that says it's 87,000 instead of the 70,000?
Sure, I have like Excel documents too if you want.
Yeah, if you want to submit that to the clerk, that'd
Sure.
be great. And then the other question I have is, how is this sustainable in the future for that position? Like, this is excess now, but is it going to be sustainable for that position after? I'm sure it'll be budgeted in the future, but like, do you see it being sustainable?
Sure. So actually I want to kind of talk again about what Mayor Nicholson was saying is with the push in VA claims that we're doing right now, that's going to bring in that extra income to the city and limit the amount of clients that we have on Chapter 115. Our Chapter 115 numbers are already significantly declining because we have done a very large number of VA claims that have came back with positive effects and they've received benefits, which makes them no longer eligible for financial assistance. So that's the biggest push that we're working on right now, is trying to get that federal funding, because it not only makes people ineligible for Chapter 115, it also brings more money into the community as well. So I think because if we make this position full-time, it gives us more time to be able to allot to push those VA claims. VA claims are very time-consuming. They're a lot of work. I'm working on a few that were appealing back from like the 80s. So I have probably a stack of paperwork this large in just one client's file that we have to go through every single thing that's been submitted to the VA previously, figure out how to fix that, and to get them to receive retro pay. So I've had clients in the past, not in this last year, but before, that have received retro payments upwards of 6 figures. So but they do take a lot of time. So having that additional staff member to allow me to have more time to focus on VA claims and not have to work so much on Chapter 115 will allow us to be bringing in all that extra money, and so that our Chapter 115 budget can continue to decline.
And I'm assuming the same thing, the ratio between 115 rather, and VA claims is the same with the surrounding communities?
That's correct.
And another question. In the past, we used to, good, bad, or indifferent, Gardner was expending more on 115 than many of the larger communities around us. Knowing that we do get reimbursed for 115, but a long time down the road. The VA claims, are these reimbursed, or do we have to upfront this, or are those straight to the recipients, the clients?
Those go straight to the client, so none of that would be coming through city.
We don't
funding
have
at
to
all.
upfront as
Correct.
we did with the 115.
Correct. And actually, some
that's
of
very
that, so say we have a client that's on Chapter 115, and then we do a VA claim for that person, and they get retro pay for like the last year. With that retro pay, they're actually supposed to be reimbursing the city for the time that we paid them for that many months that they received that retro payment for. So we might actually be getting money back from our
Chapter
clients
115.
with those VA claims.
Okay.
I should also note too, there's already a part-time position funded in the budget. That position is currently vacant. So that's why I'm looking to transfer the position now while it's vacant, so that we can advertise for a full-time position and probably get a larger applicant pool with it too, rather than advertising for a part-time and then maybe losing someone because they can't do full-time work.
This will give us 2 full-time people?
3.
3 full-time?
Including-
And that
Including
satisfies,
And clerical,
Yeah.
so that's 3 full-time staff,
Yes,
and then the director.
yes, and that does.
3
satisfy.
total.
3 total, so that's including you.
That's including me.
Okay.
that satisfies the numerical requirement?
It will
VA
actually
claims.
put us in a little bit of access so that we're able to, if eventually we end up getting another community, we still might be able to meet the staffing requirements depending on the population of the other community that we would be adding to the district.
There's about a 40,000 population swing before you have to start adding additional staff to it, so that should give us a little bit of a buffer that we could add probably 2 or 3 more towns before we have to add any staff.
Well, if it gets us away from the 115 and gives better service for the clients, I think it's a win-win for both of us because you got, there was a period of time, 6 figures,
Yeah.
and Gardner was spending
How many clients do we have now?
incredible amount of money. It was a long time before we got our reimbursement, so I'm very much in favor of this. I'll make a motion that we recommend passage.
Second?
Motion made by Councilor Cormier, seconded by Councilor Generlouts to recommend passage to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 10856. An ordinance to amend the code of the City of Gardner, Chapter 171, Section 68, entitled Personnel Compensation Schedule related to FY 2023 Supplemental Budget. Mayor Nicholson?
Thank you, Madam President. This is the compensation schedule ordinance required to be passed that goes in conjunction with the funding that was approved in the supplemental budget. The ordinance was not put up with the supplemental budget just in case there were any changes that were made, but it does reflect the additional funding for the GIS coordinator from the water and sewer enterprise accounts, as well as the ability to pay the new food and housing inspector and the part-time domestic violence advocate. Without these items being listed in the compensation schedule ordinance, we legally cannot pay them. So this is how we go about that. So once this ordinance passes to its second and final printing, if that is the pleasure of the council, that's when we can start posting for the positions. So we can't do that until this is passed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Questions, comments on the committee?
No?
Make a motion, we recommend passage to the council?
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Generlouts, seconded by Councilor Cormier to recommend passage to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion passes. Item 10864, an ordinance to amend the code of the City of Gardner, Chapter 171, entitled Personnel Compensation Schedule, Assistant Director of Veteran Services. Mayor Nicholson?
Thank you, Madam President. This could have been with the other ordinance because it is amending the same section, but since it's related to 2 separate other votes on the council's agenda, that's why I broke them out separately. This is related to what we were just talking about with Director Gabrilla, adding that, making the part-time Assistant Veterans Director to a full-time position that would also have to be reflected in the compensation schedule in order for us to pay them at a full-time rate. So this is doing that housekeeping work there in conjunction with that.
Entertain a motion to recommend passage to the full council.
Second?
Motion made by Councilor Cormier, seconded by Councilor Generlouts to recommend passage to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes. First time on the agenda items. Item number 10865, an order appropriating $27,000 from free cash to the IT department cybersecurity software account. Director O'Keefe, good morning.
Good morning.
So this is for some security features within our IT department that have changed over that we need to now pay for. Would you like to talk about that?
Yes. For several years, we've been running a product made by a company called Kaspersky. And it was a wonderful product that did many things. And there was really no competitor that could do everything it did. But unfortunately, it's a Russian company. And when the Ukraine was invaded, shortly thereafter, the US government essentially told all departments in the federal government, state governments, stop using Kaspersky. So we immediately stopped. And we went to another company, but the prices rose. 21,000 of the 27 is for CrowdStrike. That is essentially, in the old school, it would be called antivirus software. We did have an order last spring to purchase that, but since the budget cycle had already started, I didn't put an annual renewal in my budget. And now we're coming up against the annual renewal this spring. The 6,000 is for patch management software. Patches on computers are required almost daily today. That's another feature Kaspersky took care of, but we needed to acquire a different package to take care of it. So those 2 items have an annual renewal of $27,000.
Thank you. Questions, comments from the committee?
Make a motion, we recommend passage to the full council?
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Generlouts, seconded by Councilor Cormier to recommend passage to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 10866, a measure declaring surplus for the purpose of land disposal of land and buildings at 73 Stewart Street. Mayor Nicholson?
Thank you, Madam President. This is a property that the city has taken through the tax title process. It is the old abandoned factory on the corner of Stewart and Nadeau Street. There is an appraisal included in the packet that shows that the property has a value of $0.00 because of its extreme deteriorated state. We're looking to see if we can get this back on the tax rolls by selling it. I'm recommending a minimum selling price of $17,500. This is what the city would have collected in taxes and filing fees. I should say not including the interest that was owed on the property before it was taken, just because the property is a tear down and there's no way around that. I don't think it'd be worth trying to get the extra $14,000 on it just to try to have it be torn down.
When someone's gonna pay that much money.
Exactly. There's got to be 6 figures at least put into it. So looking to at least make back what we were owed in taxes.
But just the cost of the tear down is prohibitive in some cases. But
Exactly.
yeah.
But just also to throw out with this here too, the city is exempt from any 21E liability. So that's any environmental concerns from the property. Since we took it by the tax title process, we are exempt and are not liable for any environmental issues with the property because we sell the property as is. So again, just as we've done with several other properties over the course of the last 2 years, getting these back on the tax rolls so we can get, you know, money in our budget from it, but also just have the highest and best use of the property compared to what it is.
Having been a furniture factory, there could be some suspicious products.
There could be.
Commissioner Jean had said in one of his correspondences here that there is, you know, a lot of furniture, like there's things in there. You know, what's the safety? In case anyone from the public asks, you know, this is a great, all of this information is really good. Like, I'm glad that we have this in here. It's really thorough, and I think it explains everything really well, what's going on with the building. But is there a safety threat, or is there anything, you know?
I think the only safety threat that's with this property is it's an all-wooden structure with no sprinklers in it in a residential neighborhood. So if that ever were to catch on fire, I'd be really concerned for almost a good stretch of Clark Street, let alone Stewart and Nadeau. And we also have Overlook Case Playground right there that we don't want any kids coming from the playground and going into the property as well. So I think those are the main safety concerns there. But I think with the sale, there's nothing that can be done besides tear it down. So I think that'll all take care of
And the
itself.
city's aware of, like, those potential issues anyways. We're aware of it. So,
Yeah.
okay.
I'll make a motion that we recommend declaring this land surplus.
Second?
Motion made by Councilor Cormier, seconded by Councilor Generalowitz to recommend that we declare surplus as a council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. The motion passes. Item 10867, a measure authorizing an intermunicipal agreement between City of Gardner and Town of Ashby for Veterans Services. Director Gabriella is back.
Thank you, Madam President.
So this is basically what the item says. We have these intermunicipal agreements. We already have Ashburnham, Westminster, and Princeton as part of it, as we kind of talked about earlier. And this is bringing the town of Ashby on board. Dr. Gabriella?
Yes, that's correct. So we've been pricing the amount of the cost from each community based off of their full population. So for Ashby, for the first year, we priced them out at about $6,500. It's going to be prorated because by the time we would be able to go into agreement and everything, it's probably going to be the beginning of the next calendar year. So we are going to price them at about $3,500 for the remainder of this year, and then come next year, it would be $6,700 and then $6,900 with an increase at about 3% each year.
The reasoning why we base the price off of the full population of the town and not the veterans population of the town is our minimum staffing levels are set by town population, by census, not by veteran population of the town. On the grounds that a veteran may be eligible and they don't know, so they're not already being assisted. So that's why you can't, because since those numbers fluctuate so much, that's why the numbers are based off of full population of the town. Also, by state law, veterans service communities that are regionalized have to be contiguous with each other. So since the town of Ashby is touching one of our other towns with a borderline, that's how we are able to regionalize with them. If they weren't a contiguous line of communities with each other, we would not be able to do this.
How did the relationship happen? Did the town of Ashby, do they
Lynette's a
approach
great
us? Or?
department head.
She's a good ambassador.
Yeah.
Actually, I received a phone call from the director of the Council on Aging in Ashby saying that they no longer had a VSO there, and they had a few veterans that were coming in and were asking questions. They wanted to know if I would be able to help them out. So I was like, yeah, send them my way. I'll help them out in the interim while you're looking for a new VSO. I found out later from the town administrator that the director of the Council on Aging was speaking with the town administrator and informed her that she had reached out to me and asked me if I would help out her veterans in the interim. And we later found out that, and she had told her about the situation and the agreement that we had. And so she reached out to me specifically and asked if it was possible for her to join. She was paying a part-time VSO, only about $2,000 a year. So she wasn't quite on board with the $6,500 increase, but I did send her a long drafted email explaining the benefits of being part of the district and all the other programs that we're running that the town of Ashby would be included in, instead of just chapter 115 applications. And eventually she did decide that she was willing to pay the additional $4,500. And she talked to her town councilor and they all agreed as well.
Just to throw this out there too, we cannot turn a veteran away that comes for services. This is something that they've earned, but we do document when we do get veterans from other towns that are coming, and Lynette does a good job of sending the town administrators and the select boards of those towns a notice whenever we do service a veteran from those communities to let them know that a veteran came to us and said that they're not getting adequate services from their community, so we had to help them out. That way it puts them on their radar. Lynette's also instituted a system in which we can track the veterans that we are seeing in the office and serving, so we know that we have this many veterans from Ashburnham, this many veterans from Gardner, this many veterans from Westminster coming into the office, so that we can compile all that data, so that when we go back to renew the agreements later on, we actually have solid data to say we brought in this much money to veterans from this community and that helped this many people from there too. So that'll all be tracked with Ashby as well.
I'm assuming the benefits you've talked about for the city of Gardner, where they're getting off of 115 under the federal funds, are a great selling point, I guess, for lack of a better term, for these other smaller towns who aren't able to provide those type of services.
Definitely.
Okay.
But if you're obligated to use 115 benefits, that would be Ashby's nickel.
That's correct.
Okay.
So they would be basically paying us to contribute towards our staffing costs, but any of their expenses would be coming out of the town of Ashby. What I did do this year is, with purchasing flags for Memorial Day, is we purchased them all out of the city of Gardner budget and then had each town reimburse Gardner for their portion of the flags. So it would be the same
or
with
something.
Correct.
Okay.
So it would be the same with Ashby, but the only additional cost for us would be additional staff that we would need.
And that's promulgated by the regulations based on population.
Correct.
Okay. It seems to be working well, and it's helping the benefits both. And I'll make a motion that we recommend the authorization.
Second?
Motion made by Councilor Cormier, seconded by Councilor Genowatz to recommend authorization to the full council. Is there discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you. Is there any new business?
Motion to adjourn?
Mayor
Second.
Nicholson, you got something?
I just want to let the Finance Committee know that the DOR did certify the tax rate and actually lowered the tax rate even further. So they noticed a formula error in the Excel spreadsheet that we had, so the tax rate is going to be $16.13, not the $16.16 that was said at the tax classification hearing. And that will go out on the January 1st bills, as well with a inserted notice to make sure that the residents realize that the tax rate dropped from 1859 to 1613.
Can you insert a notice? I thought you couldn't.
If it's related to taxation, you can.
Okay.
So that's where that is.
Can you issue a notification to the council
Yes.
for the meeting? So
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? There was a motion to adjourn, made by Councilor Genowatz, seconded by Councilor Cormier. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. Motion passes. Meeting stands adjourned. Thank you, everybody.